Once these really extreme moves go, they can really go, no matter the market. I think the reason I'm still so bullish is because there aren't too many investments outside of the cryptos that are true alternatives to the conventional real estate, bonds, and stocks. So I think there'll be more frightened capital that'll move out of conventional investments and into the metals than ever before.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for April 22nd through April 29th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature backdated 1-ounce silver Canadian maples at $3.25 over spot. We also have pre-33 AU $10 gold liberties at $34 over a half-ounce spot. And finally, we're offering 90% constitutional silver at just $2.75 over spot. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is our good friend David Morgan, the silver guru from themorganreport.com. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, Elijah, it's always fun to be with you. Thank you.
Well, it's great to have you today. I did want to get your perspective on the move we've seen in precious metals over the last couple months. Obviously, this has been significant, and a lot of people have been waiting for gold to finally break out above the to sustain that $2,000 level. And there was the question, is it support? Is it resistance? And the market has answered that it is now support. And we've gone to $2,400 gold. We're off that a bit. Your perspective on the general state of the markets right now?
Right now, the precious metals markets are pretty much in a consolidation phase. You could say from a trading perspective, they're overbought and they need to take a breather, the old adage, back and fill. So we need to gain another level of support for both gold and silver. But adding on to what you opened with, Elijah, it wasn't just 3 months ago that we were kind of wondering, is 2,000 going to be support or resistance, as you said, and of course, obviously, it's now support. We had a nice big move up past 2,400 US dollar terms, and I've been asked to write a missive for a publication which I write for 3-4 times a year, and he wanted me to comment on the gold's all-time high. And in that missive, I said, it's only a nominal all-time high. If you use the U.S. government CPI calculator, so we're using their numbers, you need $3,222 gold to equal the purchasing power of a 1980 $850 gold. I think that's important, really not for maybe our viewers, but someone that's coming on board now, like, gold is too high. It's its all-time high. It's all-time nominal only. So coming back to the other question, I think I looked at the chart. I mean, I've done a lot of technical work. I don't feature it a lot in the Morgan Report, but we look at it from time to time. It looks like it could do a head and shoulders top. I really doubt that with the all this going on geopolitically, the war drums, the conflicts increasing with Iran involved now. I mean, I can see a correction, a high-level consolidation further. Silver's launched later than gold. We all knew this time gold had to lead the way it has. I really want to see silver over 30. And from my perspective, Elijah, to finish, I do not see this as the high point for the year. I think we're going to get over 30 for silver and probably hit the 25 mark at least in the gold market.
Now, in the short term, obviously, we are seeing some consolidation. And if we look at the COT report, the banks are very short silver right now. So that typically signals that we're going to have lower prices in the coming weeks. Your perspective on where we are in the COT report?
I've been looking at it not as long as Ted Butler, but almost, because I was probably one of the first to find Ted way back in the 2000, 25, 24 years ago. Anyway, right now, from the latest report out on the 23rd, futures only, You've got the trading funds at 86,000 contracts long and 26,000 short. So you do that quick arithmetic, you're looking at 60,000 long. That's kind of the upper end of the extreme. Usually it's 50,000-ish. It's 10,000 above that. You look at the commercials, the ones that control the market, the major banks, bullion banks, and their cohorts. They're 120,000 contracts short and only 43,000 long. So there again, you've got a pretty big overhang of paper silver overhanging the market without much more ammunition. What's ammunition? It's what an investor uses or talks about in slang terms as dry powder, new money. And in order for this market to move much further, you need new buying pressure. And it's already come off. We haven't seen any increase in buying pressure. In fact, selling pressure, that's why the price is down. So, from that perspective, Elijah, I totally agree. I think we're going to see more downside than upside based on the latest commitment of traders.
Looking to the end of the year, you're saying, though, that this pullback is going to be short-lived. So what kind of time frame are you looking for until we continue to see higher prices?
Yeah, of course, short and long relative. So I see the market from the construct right now, both in the physical realm and in the futures markets, going into the summer's doldrums, meaning that the metals pull back in the summer, as they almost always do. And then there's a gap in the chart for silver at 26 something, 30, I believe, somewhere in that. I expect that gap to be filled. I don't expect it to go a lot below that, maybe 25 or so. And I think that'll take most of the summer. The old adage, sell in May and come back after Labor Day. So I think that'll hold for the metals as well as the general stock market. And we'll be able to come back in probably late summer, early fall, and we'll start to build from wherever we end up, back up. And of course, the black swan factor is always out there. We always have to think about it. That could change everything almost instantly. But barring that, I think we'll get a down market through the summer months and up market starting in the fall. I think it'll get a pretty good run to the end of the year. It'll be really interesting to see what happens going toward the November election. How much turmoil, consternation, what's going on with not only market activity, but the rhetoric from the mainstream press, the mainstream financial press, the world commentary on the U.S. election. A lot going on this year. I think the best thing to do is be balanced. You need some precious metals. You don't have to overload, but you don't want to be underweighted either.
Now, when it comes to where we are in this precious metal bull market, you've talked about how there's really 3 stages in a bull market, and you think that we're in the 3rd stage, which is the most exciting because metals typically go up the fastest during this stage, and we get the most gains, and it doesn't last too long. Right.
Yeah, it's most markets too. I remember in my much younger days, there was a front page business of the LA Times, and it showed the stock market doing this, parabolic move. And basically the commentary on that particular day was that, how much higher can it go? And the answer is it was about double from there. So once these really extreme moves go, they can really go no matter the market. I think the reason I'm still so bullish is because there aren't too many investments outside of the cryptos that are true alternatives to the conventional real estate, bonds, and stocks, unless you own a business or something, own the business rather than own stock in a business. So I think there'll be more frightened capital that'll move out of conventional investments and into the metals than ever before. Certainly the money supply is bigger than it's ever been on a global basis. And it's a world market, not just a bunch of, Americans that are concerned about us, bifurcating from a sound money system into a fiat only system. And in those days, since I was aware of it, I participated or whatever, that's such a small percentage of the population. Today, almost everybody knows it. They may not have taken action yet, but they have the ability to take action more quickly than ever before. It's a mouse click and you can buy a gold stock. It's a mouse click and you can buy from Miles Franklin, for example. I think their website's up. I'm not sure, but it's at least a phone call. There's not much to it. Whereas the old days, you look it up in the yellow pages, get in your car, drive down there, and you're giving the guy hard cash, and is that a real piece of gold? I've never seen one before. All the stuff that goes into it. So I do expect once that move begins in earnest, where we get into kind of the panic move, where the fear of missing out takes hold of the consciousness and it's global rather than national, I still expect to see some pretty spectacular moves in the metals. Where's that? When is that? Where is it? It's global. When is it? I don't know. I don't think it's this year, but I think it could begin this year.
In your perspective on where the demand is coming from, because what I've found to be very interesting as we've seen this rise in the prices of both gold and silver, the retail demand has been pretty weak and premiums are down quite a bit. Really, the only premium that is up is the Silver Eagles, and pretty much everything else is down. But we also see a dynamic where in Asia, the Shanghai market is trading at a premium for both gold and silver. So where do you think it's mainly the East that's buying the gold? Your perspective on where the demand is coming from?
Yeah, everything you said is correct. And if we go back to this market, meaning this bull market that we're still in, and it's had a long pause for a decade or more. But if you look at when Mike Maloney started, Mike did something that was way outside the box for almost anybody else I know. And what he did was he wrote a letter to Robert Kiyosaki on the flight back from GATA 21. And we had breakfast that morning. And he made a case, a very strong one with Robert, about real estate to gold. And it caught. And it was perfect timing because Mike said, real estate's overpriced, metals are underpriced. You ought to consider switching out of one asset, not totally, but, lightening up on one and building a position in the other. And it couldn't have been more correct. Well, I look at that as a small analysis to what's going on in China. China has real estate. Well, if Evergrande and all these other big firms in China with these ghost cities and these apartments that are half built and all the, let's say, real estate failures, they did a switcheroo from real estate being the most stable, best investment you can make and move back into gold. And that's a 1.4 billion population. So I think that's what's really going on. I think it's it's not so subtle, but I don't think too many, I'm probably the first one on your show to say it. Call them as I see them, as you well know, you've known me for years. And that's how I see it. So it could be a lot bigger than, the Chinese like gold. If their whole consciousness and investing shifted from gold's better than real estate, we're just getting started. I actually put up a post, you might have seen it on Twitter, but the Chinese go crazy in quotation marks for gold. They, from my experience, I lived in San Francisco. I've been to Chinatown many times. I love the Chinese. It gets me so politically correct, but my take is they take a pretty strong view on being risk adverse. There's a lot of gambling in the Chinese community. If you're going to speculate in, penny mining shares, that's sort of a gambler's mentality. My point being is I think it's just getting started. I think it's a true change. If I'm right, that big parabolic move I keep alluding to could be fueled primarily by the East, not the West.
It's very interesting because, what the premium in Shanghai means is that there's an arbitrage opportunity where physical metal can then go from the West to the East. So there's also, we've talked before about the BRICS and how a lot of those countries and their central banks are accumulating gold. And it's maybe a concerning development for people in the West because it's like, well, if Western central banks and countries are not valuing gold in the same way that the East is, then there may be a shift in, the who actually has control in the future. Your perspective on that?
Well, absolutely. the idea that he who owns the gold makes the rules, that's pretty much been a fact for, you know, for centuries. I mean, you get somebody as smart as Martin Armstrong, and he probably argue that point, but from a long-term perspective, it ebbs and it flows. You go from a gold standard, which isn't the best, but it's been one of the best, into morphing to a fiat standard that collapses, and then come back into a asset-based currency. So it kind of goes, and this is very broad brush. It's not the exact monetary history, certainly not, but it's sound money, non-sound money, failure, back to sound money, off sound money, failure, back to sound money. That's kind of the, again, broad brush view. So if that's the case, that for the next system to really work, maybe proposing a CBDC that doesn't work and needing to back by gold, and the East has most of the gold. And there's also a subset to that as a kind of a proof, like you're doing a proof on a math equation. And the proof is if you follow where the gold trail is, it's always the producing nation. So if you go back pre-US, where the US held most of the gold, it was held by Great Britain. And they were the main producers. Yes, it was a colonial system and all that, but under the UK umbrella, they produced the most and had the most gold. Then you go to World War II, and the US, produced the most production, and mostly the war machine, and then post the war, housing, cars, freeways, everything else. And all the gold, not all, but the lion's share of the gold went to the US. Now the lion's share of the gold has gone to China. So it just follows. You can say, well, wait a minute. If you just, follow the money, one of the best things we can do in journalism, it doesn't, get the personalities out, get the bias out, get the politics out. Just look at where the money's flowing. It's gone from the UK to the US to China. What does that mean? Well, it suggests strongly that you're right, that we're going to see the Chinese have the commanding, maybe not currency, maybe not global currency, but certainly a much higher status in the financial market or the monetary system than we see today. And if you take it a step further and look at their CBDC, which is by far the most advanced and most utilized in the world, maybe that's it. And they're just using their gold as a backup plan or as a subtle way to reinforce their power if they get resistance to it. I don't know. I don't know the future, but I do know what it looked like in the past. And as Mike Maloney says, the further you can look back, usually the more you could go forward. So there's my 2 cents.
Now, I know I've talked to Clive Thompson, and he's talked about how really by far the U.S., if the official numbers are correct, still has the most gold. Your perspective on that, because obviously there's some question of, is there actually gold in Fort Knox and all of that? Do you think the U.S. has the advantage at this point?
I don't know. So let's be as honest as possible. I mean, Jeff Christian just did a video on, the gold's there. I don't know if it is, but I suspect it may not be. There's a guy named Bill Still. You can look him up. He did a pretty good analysis on what the gold situation in Fort Knox is. And let's just look at it the other way. Let's say all the gold that's purportedly in Fort Knox, I think right now it's like 263 million troy ounces is there. Location doesn't prove ownership. So every ounce that's on paper could be there, but yet it could be loaned out, it could be swapped out, it could be used as collateral for foreign exchange purposes. It could be, something that's used by the funds protection team. So there's a lot to it, a lot more than seeing a line item written down on an official document that says U.S. gold, ... and it puts a number out there. I mean, I don't buy into that. For me, I want a strong audit. I want to see really, not only where it's located, but who's the owner of it. So I doubt that we have it all, the U.S., as far as ownership of it. Location, maybe. I actually doubt that as well, but not that's that important, because it's not. It's the ownership. And that one isn't that hard to do, but yet the audit, I think the last time took place was in a full audit, was in like the early 50s. So it's been a long time. If it's all there, it's too expensive. Come on, folks. It's not too expensive. You guys, you Congress critters are spending $10 billion a day. So it's not going to cost $10 billion to do a complete audit of the gold in Fort Knox. Let's get realistic. Let's do one, and let's put this idea to rest so that Jeff and I can both agree that a full audit's taken place, and here's how much gold the U.S. owns.
Now, I did want to also discuss cryptocurrencies. You recently had a video on this, and the title was fantastic. It really made me think. It was, if Bitcoin is the answer, what is the question? So I think that's what we all have to think about, is what solution is Bitcoin trying to solve?
First of all, it's very common through monetary history that when you get to the end of the great inflations, that people themselves find their own solutions. So the wooden nickel, the tally sticks, there's lots of things that have taken place in monetary history that allow people to produce, use their labor, either, physically or intellectually or both, to produce a good service that's needed by the community, and they make their own transaction. They write it down on a piece of paper, they use a tally stick, whatever. So you see that come to the fore. And what we saw was the initiation of Bitcoin. It was the first cryptocurrency that came to be well known, and still is. And the idea behind it was a libertarian's dream. I mean, you basically could be unbanked. You could do a peer-to-peer transaction. It was anonymous, and all the factors we like in a sound money system was provided by the white paper. And instead of being a physical commodity, it was a digital asset. And so the beginning, I think, started off very, very much in the idea of, hey, basically my dream, let's move the money power away from the banking elite into the pockets of humanity, into the common people. Let us have the money power. Let's take it away from the bankers. They use it as a control mechanism. But that's not what's taken place. It did initially, or it certainly looked like it. And as I wrote 10 years ago, my 2 bits about Bitcoin, I said the problem I see going forward is if it gains a lot of traction and it becomes popular enough, watch out, it'll probably be usurped by the bankers, and that's what's happened. So you basically see the MasterCard folks own a great deal of Bitcoin, and you get the maxis and all that. Look, I'm free market. You think Bitcoin's the only investment to own? Then go ahead. I wouldn't, but if you choose that path, that's your choice, and I support your choice. But I think it's lost its luster. So if Bitcoin is the answer, what is the question? The question is anonymity. Nope. You can track it and trace it. Is it quick peer-to-peer? Nope. Takes more time than most other competitors. Is it a real asset you can hold in your hand and pass on for generations like a gold coin? Nope. You got to have a computer, and you've got to have some way to store it, and it's got to be electronic. Is it ubiquitous where everybody understands it? Nope, but gold is. I mean, that's why they put a gold coin in the survival kit of a jet fighter pilot, because gold, no matter where you bail out, will buy you something. It is ubiquitous. So not to be a Bitcoin basher, I'm trying to be objective. I'm sure to the Bitcoiners I don't sound it. But I love the idea in the beginning, and unfortunately, the question cannot be answered anymore. It used to maybe be an answer for freedom, and I think it's been usurped, and it's not an answer to freedom anymore. And I'm sad to say that. Not that I'm a lover, I'm objective about it, or try to be. But are there other cryptos that will fill in? Yeah, but still, they aren't the same as a physical piece of metal, and they never will be. And I think that's important for people to know. I like the idea I could put $100,000 worth of gold and silver on my wallet and take it to another country and then demand physical delivery, pay the fees, pay whatever, because it's not free to mail it, ship it. But nonetheless, that could be done in the metals world today now, where that ability to do was not available until the crypto scene showed up. But maybe I over answered it, but thanks for asking, because I want to be beneficial to everybody's thinking. I don't expect everyone to agree with mine, but I want them to see the transition that I went through, to see that a really good idea can be hacked, taken over, and yet some of the proponents are still squawking about its attributes that really don't exist anymore.
You mentioned how some of these large companies are actually owning a large amount of Bitcoin. Can you kind of explain a bit more why that undermines Bitcoin itself?
Well, it's like any asset. I mean, the housing market or the wheat market or the silver market or any market, if you have, you can make a poker analogy. And if you're sitting at the poker World Series and you sit down at the table initially and you get $100 and I've got 10,000, I've got a lot better chance of winning than you do, because when I get the good hand, I can really wipe you out pretty easily because I own most of it. So it's a control thing. I mean, I take the stock market. I mean, some of these companies that are owned by, these huge Black Rocks and State Street and these others, I mean, they basically control the market because they control the majority. I mean, you as a shareholder might, get your proxy and make your vote and vote for whoever on the board of directors or some direction the company should take on ESG or whatever, but it's almost meaningless relative to the big players. So unfortunately, it's a momentum. It's a situation where if you own, the vast majority, you have the most votes, you get to steer the ship, and you have most of the control. That's the problem.
Yeah, and I think also to highlight, one other thing you said was how it's not really understood by a lot of people. I mean, even I understand some of the concepts with respect to Bitcoin, but it seems like you need this mass understanding of it for it actually to be able to be used as a currency, which I don't think most people have even a remote understanding of what it is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of throwing back and forth between the pro and the con Bitcoin folks, and either side doesn't really understand it. I would try to keep it as simple as possible. It started off as a currency peer-to-peer, and then when that morphed because of speed, time delays, clearing, and all that, it was apparent to the obvious that it really didn't work as a peer-to-peer settlement. And so now it's just this great asset that you just hold on to and you never sell because it's always going to increase in value. And so far, that's been pretty much true. I will not, try to be objective here, but you don't want, if you want a currency, you want something that's instantaneous and easy to transact and no holding charge. I mean, I think the cost, and it depends what Google or what search engine you use. Google would get one price, Bing another, DuckDuckGo another, but looks like it's about $10 a transaction. So am I going to go into Starbucks, buy a $6 coffee with a $10 transaction and have to wait 10 minutes for the transaction to clear? No, I'm not. So it's lost that idea. And that was, according to the way I read the white paper, which I have read, that's the original idea. It was peer-to-peer settlement process that was free of anybody's interference. That was anonymous and a great idea. And that's not what it is today.
If our viewers are interested in learning more about your cryptocurrencies series, they can go to the Silver Guru YouTube channel. We'll put a link in the description here. Also, the morganreport.com. Can you share what our viewers will find there?
Yeah, they'll find interviews like this, Elijah, I've done for the last 20 plus years and put up on the web. I think there's a favorites button. If you want the crypto conspiracy, just type in crypto conspiracy. There's 29 of them, I believe. I'd recommend the first one, the fourth one, the 14th one, and maybe the last two. Kind of that could, you don't have to watch them all. I think the fourth one's pretty interesting because there's ties to some of the biggest founders of Bitcoin that we know of. Satoshi Nakamoto does not show up, but you look at some of the MIT connections, Bill Gates connections, Ito, some of these folks that are out there that are way high up the food chain in Silicon Valley and MIT. It's quite fascinating who's connected to who. And Kurt Wuckert is the number 14 interview. And John Perez and myself have done a lot of research, a lot of groundwork, a lot of digging, and came to some conclusions. And Kurt is an archivist. And so I brought him on to say, am I right? Am I wrong? And I'm open to being wrong, believe me. And he said, no, you pretty much nailed it. And I noticed on his YouTube channel, I think it was only a week or two at the most, go Elijah, He's got a book. I don't know if he wrote it or not. I retweeted it pretty quickly, but it goes through what we've been talking about how it's been basically usurped, and it's different than what it was, was what it was proposed to be in the early days.
Any last thoughts before we let you go, David?
Yeah, I think it's interesting times. I think we need to stay grounded, stay centered, try not to get our emotions too much tugged one direction or the other. You don't have to be apolitical, but you don't have to put your life into someone outside of yourself. I think faith really starts with something more spiritual rather than what man can do for man, what we can do individually and in our community, and control what we can, eat to your best ability, stay balanced, keep your friends close, keep your community close. In other words, use your heart more. I think, we get in our heads, especially in the West, of what's wrong. And of course, I'm guilty of it as well. But when it comes down to it, your memories are all you have at the end of the day. And that's where you want to put out, your personality, your essence, your being to others to just make a great day. I mean, you can make, most of life is what you make it. And if you go with a chip on your shoulder or a bad attitude because somebody in the political scene pissed you off, you're ruining your own day. Just let that go. Don't pay that much attention to it. Just move on and do what you can. That'd be my advice.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate that, David. Thank you so much for your time, and God bless.
Bless you.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for April 22nd through April 29th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature backdated 1-ounce silver Canadian maples at $3.25 over spot. We also have pre-33 AU $10 gold liberties at $34 over a half-ounce spot. And finally, we're offering 90% constitutional silver at just $2.75 over spot. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.